This is Keith Wooden, and welcome to Story Mosaics. You know, one of the fun things that people ask me all the time is, how do you get your stories? And frankly, they come from you. The other day, I was online and I happened to be talking with a friend of mine, Jennifer, and Jennifer said, "Oh, I just heard this person speak the other day, and you have to ask them to tell their story." And she said, "And it's on pain." And I thought, you really want me to go out and listen to a story on pain and go through the whole thing again for myself? But anyway, she said, "No, no, you've got to hear this story." So I went out right away, listened to an audio and video version of a story that Stacie was giving in front of a group of people. And I was so moved by it that I then contacted her and I said, "Would you be willing to tell your story on Story Mosaics?" She said yes. And here's what was fun though. She, in preparation for this, she said, "I had all these cards. Stacie, you got to show me all of these cards that you
Like,
had."
Steve, look at this stack of cards. I mean, who writes it like that? I don't even know what I was doing.
uh, well, Stacie, I mentioned to you, the fun thing is that most of the people that I've had as guests on Story Mosaics have been people who have an education background. And then all of a sudden you say just in a few moments ago, "Yeah, I have an education background." We
I
all
do.
do that, by the way. We all write our notes that way. So uh,
Okay, well, I don't feel so bad.
Hey, and Stacie, if you saw my notes, it would be so funny because I write really minuscule, and people say, "Can you actually read this?" And I can, but nobody else can, and so it's a little like a doctor, but then it's not. So nothing that educated. So, oh, Stacie, thank you for joining us. I want to get a little bit of a background because you were asked by your church. What church do you attend at this time?
I attend Northview Church in Anderson, so the Anderson campus
And
of
they have
Northview.
a program called What That Girl. Help me understand what that girl is.
That girl started, this is the second year for it. And we also have a men's program called Valor. They both started, this is the second year for both, I should say. And they meet once a month. They have a big kickoff in the fall. And then they meet once a month and they just talk about each month issues that are pertinent to both genders. So things that men might be thinking about, such as integrity and being the head of the household. And for women, they talk about a number of things. And the overarching theme this year was surrender. So surrendering
Wow.
a number of things, your pride, your families, your marriage. And my month just happened to be on surrendering pain, which I had
Wow.
to do. So it was God is amazing how he works out little details
And
that I thought, well,
Stacie,
that's the one
I,
thing I can talk about.
I am so glad that they had people within their fellowship, within the group that you're a part of, to come share their stories. Because then sometimes, if we have this professional speaker, we put them on a pedestal and we forget that they have pain or they have sorrow or they have grief as well. And we kind of get one step removed from them. But by someone that sat beside them last month coming up and sharing their story, that is so powerful. And so, Stacie, we're going to rewind this whole thing just for a moment, and I would want you to tell your story and how it relates to this pain in your life that God has kind of walked you through step by step. And if I interrupt you, I'll apologize ahead of time, but it's because I really want to understand how God worked through this in your life. So kick it off. Let's hear about your story. And this is just like we say, everyone has their story, and this is your story.
Wow. And to think I used to worry about not having a story, but the Lord fixed that, didn't he? I do have to say
Yes.
thank you for even asking me to share my story. I think it's kind of funny because I'm just a regular person with a job and a life and it doesn't seem like anything special. But I also want to say to you that I agree about asking someone local in your church body to share because I did invite a couple of people, a couple of girls that I really want you to hear what I'm saying because I know what you're going through and I want you to hear this. Um, and that makes all the difference when you know someone,
It does.
yeah, that says, look, I've done this and I know you think you can't, but you absolutely can.
Oh man, it
So
makes all the difference.
I'm
Thanks.
glad you said that. It's a good call out. So Yeah, you know what? I grew up as a Christian. I literally was born on the way to church. My parents had to detour, have someone come pick up the donuts because I was born on the way to church. And I don't remember, I don't ever, I never knew a life outside of church or knowing God or accepting Jesus. I became a Christian when I was 6 years old, went to a Christian school from preschool all the way to high school into college. So I just say all that to say I was steeped in a lot of Bible knowledge, but my religion wasn't my own until a few things in my life happened. So I came away from all of that thinking, man, if I'm just a good person, things are going to go smoothly and work out for me, and God's going to bless me, and it's going to be a good life. And I never heard the phrase, bad things happen to good people, until in my 20s. And there's some, my story kind of surround, let me say that again. My story has some big moments. That's how I tell my story. Over the last 30 years, there have been these pivotal moments. And so that's all it is. And one of the first things happened in my 20s. I met a boy, and he was super nice and kind and hardworking, and he hung around, and I didn't have that much experience dating. And the fact that he hung around made me think that he was probably the one.
Mm.
And he went to church with me because I went to church. And so I knew that he didn't really have a relationship with Christ. But I thought that because he was interested, or at least going with me, that surely he would become that person. Uh,
Wow.
before,
You kind of get into that mindset, especially if the person is willing to kind of walk with you through that, and yet that wasn't something from his heart. So
no, and it's not the same. And that is when I learned that, and their relationship with God is their relationship with God. It cannot have anything to do with
yes,
mine. I
yes.
learned that then, that that is for real, and I can't help that relationship with someone else. I can't force it on them, which I never would, but I can't love them into a relationship with Jesus. It has to come on their own. So that was a big, hard lesson, but I learned it when we became engaged and planned the wedding. And to my shock, 2 days before the wedding, he came to my house and sat on my front porch with his brother-in-law, who I loved, and said, "I'm. This is not the right relationship. We're good people, but this is not the right relationship. I don't think I'll make you happy." And in truth, immediately when he said that, I knew that the Lord had already put it on my heart that I want something more for you. I knew that I had heard that in my mind. I just hadn't identified it as the voice of God, because it wasn't a voice, it was a thought in my head or an urging in my heart. I could feel it in my soul, but I didn't know to listen that that was God's voice at
Stacie, I
that
really
critical.
appreciate those three statements that you made there, because I think people need to hear this. I knew it in my head. I felt it in my heart. There is something in my soul. And when I hear that, um, we discount those, though.
We
Sometimes we
do.
discount those. Stacie, I'm sitting here. Okay, I'm a kind of an emotional guy. Okay, so if I start crying in the middle of this, you'll understand. But I can't imagine, Stacie, you're sitting there on the porch and you're getting this news. There was this tearing that I'm hearing. Is I recognize this as truth, but you had put all of your heart, soul, and energy into planning this, right?
Yeah, yeah. All the invitations had gone out months ago. The wedding was in 2 days, so everything was done. The dress was fitted, the cake was decorated, the flowers were put together. The next day was a dress rehearsal. So we literally, I did not personally, but my family called everyone on the guest list to say, "Hey, don't come on Saturday. It's not going to happen." And I think my parents saved me a little bit from having to do that, and I'm so grateful. I don't even think I knew how grateful until I started to talk about the story, to say I didn't have to call. They took that burden for me, and I've always had some guilt about the financial burden that that probably put on my parents to pay for a wedding that never happened. And um, but in that same moment, I felt relief, just because still I was identifying that that was the voice of God that I heard or that I felt. And I think it's important to notice that it takes practice to hear that. I
Yes.
questioned it a lot. I questioned it, was that I think that on my own, or was that really the voice of God? But there came a time in the days following that that I just was really crushed. And I think more than even crushed, was embarrassed that this had happened. And whew, why wasn't I good enough? Why couldn't I fix it? All
Did you
kinds of
really?
questions.
That's such a huge word, Stacie. And again, it's tugging at my heart when you say I wasn't good enough. Did that run through your head?
Oh, that became
That became your mantra, huh? Oh, oh,
and to be honest, I think if you're in women's circles, which I don't expect you to be in
nope, I'm not there.
but it is often the conversation that women feel too much or too little. They're too much of something and too little of another thing. If they had been more of this or less of that,
Oh my
then that
goodness. Oh
person
my
would have
goodness.
stayed. They wouldn't have gotten beaten. They could have controlled their children. They could have done a million things. So I think that's a normal thought for most women. I'm
Yeah,
too much or I'm
yeah,
too little.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you. But so there was now you're in a healing mode, and that just I don't even know what that looks like.
I didn't either. Uh, to say the least, I sowed my wild oats after that. I did hear, I had a moment in a closet where I just was really sobbing it all out. And I heard for sure, like I said, in my head and in my heart. And as a former pastor at Northview used to say, you know, and you're knower that this or that is true, or that you just know in your knower. And I knew in my knower. And that was the best way. All those years later, I heard him say that and went, yeah, that's the only way I can describe how I hear God, is this nudging in my, I feel it all the places in my head, my heart, they all align. And I go, it has to be. And if scripture can back it up, then it has to be. And so it
Oh,
has
that's
to
right.
be that I heard God say to me, I said no. But it wasn't an angry voice. It was a beautiful, kind, caring, sincere voice. And I wanted to hear it again. And I just knew that he had been telling me. He had been telling me, you were discontented for a reason in your heart. I was telling you I wanted more for you than that. And that was when I started to say, I want to know what your voice sounds like, and I want to hear it and respond fast. Now, it would take several years for that to happen. And like I said, I sowed some wild oats, made some really dumb decisions, dated some losers, and uh, did
Yeah,
some great things in there too. But
I
yeah,
love I love this, Stacie, and I just want to go back to it because you're talking about knowing in your knower, and there was an essence that when God said it was no,
mhm,
I know so many people that when they hear that statement, they're immediately jumping to a finger wagging, angry God. And I want to just celebrate that you did not hear an angry God. You heard a God of compassion and love
yeah,
and empathy for you.
yeah.
And then you say, and then I made some dumb mistakes. And you know what? He never changed his attitude during those days either, did he?
I don't know how, Keith. I really don't know how. I mean, I have asked God so many times. My favorite thing about God is that I can fight with him, and he is just not deterred. He doesn't care one ounce that I'm, "Rrr." But I just said, how do you put up with me? I don't get this life. It's hard. Why does it have to be so hard? And in the same time, I almost know in my knower where he goes, you know why it has to be so hard. You don't learn if I just tell it to you.
That's right.
You
That's right.
only learn when you have to go experience it, which is true. I'm not the smartest uh, sharpest tool in the shed. So I do
Yeah.
need the field trip to learn the lesson generally. I
Yep.
don't learn it in the classroom, but he knows that. So he just has, I mean, this has been years cultivating this relationship where I can fight with him and um, it's okay. And I didn't fight well until after the kind of the next big thing happened in my life, which was just um, I my best friend from high school, who I trust with my whole life, she and her husband, she's still my best friend, um, wanted to set me up with a guy, and I hadn't dated anyone for a while, and they wanted to set me up with this guy, and he lived in South Carolina, and they went to college together at least, so I knew he was a godly person. But some people say that they're godly and they're a Christian, and it doesn't really mean anything. So I was like, I don't want to meet someone in South Carolina. What do I, that's crazy. Well, they gave him my phone number anyway after I told them not to, and this guy called me, and I didn't answer the phone, and my friend's husband called me immediately and said, "Why are you not answering the phone? We've just been talking for an hour to get the courage to call you. You answer the phone the next time he calls." And I said, "It's almost 11 o'clock, and no true Southern gentleman would call a lady this late at night." "Well, it's only 10 o'clock there, so answer your phone." I said,
Oh
"Okay."
my goodness. I love it. I love it.
Answered the phone and talked to him for 4 hours the first night and thought, okay, they know me. They're right. This guy is hilarious. He does love Jesus. At least he's talking that way. And um, it, I just immediately was drawn to him and his life and his Christian family. And within a matter of months, everyone that knew me was like, "Oh my gosh, this is your guy. This is your guy." And I love to laugh, Keith. I couldn't make it through life at all if I couldn't laugh at myself. Good grief. And this guy made me laugh hard. So
Mm,
when my brother, who's a cop and a skeptic, said, he's never liked any of my boyfriends ever. And he said, "This is your guy. Why would you wait?
wow.
You're 31 years old. Why would you wait to marry?" And I said, "Funny. I was thinking the same thing." So we got married after just a few months, and I was happy as a clam. We had a little private ceremony in his parents' backyard on the Warrior River in Alabama, and it was perfect. And we found a great church, lived in Kentucky, and some things started going a little wonky. And he wanted to move to Indiana, where I was very familiar with, but I didn't really want to go. But I wanted to honor my husband, and he wanted me to be near family. Um,
Mm,
and so we moved. And uh, 2 months after we moved, while I was out of town, he sent a FedEx letter to my parents' home and basically said, "I made a mistake. I shouldn't be married. Um, I'm gone. Don't try to find me." My parents read the letter, unfortunately, before I got to read it. So when I arrived at their home, they greeted me with tears and distraught emotion. And
yeah.
I just immediately said, "Well, you have 5 minutes because I'm going. He's not leaving unless I confront him."
Mm,
And I think he knew that I would do that. So in the 2 hours flat it took for me to get from Cincinnati to Pendleton, um, he had gone, and I could tell it was in a rush. The beauty of that was my brother was a cop, like I said, and he was on duty here in Indiana. And my parents had called and told him what was happening, that they thought he was at the house packing it up. And so he went, took his sergeant, and sure enough, his parents had driven through the night to help him come pack, had never once said to me, "Hey, you guys can work this out. Hey, you find a counselor. Hey, you dig in." And my family, you did those things. You didn't give up on a marriage
yeah.
without
Yeah.
any question or any kind of, you you took every action you could. So that was not the case with his family. And there were several things that I didn't know about him from his past that were coming up. And the more questions I asked, apparently, the more he was unprepared to tell me the truth and be the person in his words that he needed to be to stay married to me.
Well,
And
and you're, Stacie, I only know you a little bit, but I can tell that you're the kind of person that, you know, you're not just going to let things go under the carpet. It's not healthy, by the way. So you did what was right, but sometimes when we raise the corners of the carpet just a little bit, the truth is right in our face, and sometimes those people have never, ever, ever faced the truth, and there it is, and that can be a nightmare. And so I'm certain. Oh, and one of the things I pick up from your story is that you recognize now, what was taking place.
yeah.
Where did you run right in that moment, in that time frame? Where did you go to find even a breath of solace, a breath of, I mean, I'm just talking about, where did you go to cry, or what happened there?
What was interesting is I think the Lord left me in a house by myself because I needed to be alone. I needed no one to see me lay in the bathroom floor and not get up for an hour or scream at the Lord. I needed a private place to do that. And it just so happened he had left me with our house that,
Uh,
he'd taken all of the money, but I did have a home for a little while and I did have my dog. And so I spent a lot of time with that dog. And I know people think that it's kind of crazy, but dog spelled backwards is God. And that dog gave me the most unconditional love. And every time I looked at him, I felt like God was looking at me saying, I don't care that your hair is a mess. I don't even care that your breath stinks. I don't care if you brushed your teeth this morning. I'm just happy to see you. And that made a big difference for me. That was one thing that I went to. I just spent a lot of time running and walking and being with my dog, but I also went to a church and that church did not know what to do with me. It was sad. I think at the time, I remember that my home church in Cincinnati was a pretty big church, and they were the first ones that had ever had a divorce care seminar that I was aware of.
wow.
I had never heard of it, and I went to it with a friend who was going through a divorce to just be a support for her. And I was so impressed that they were talking about it because it wasn't really something that churches were talking
There
about
you go.
at
There
that
you go.
time. And here I was several years later needing it myself and not finding a support at all in my church. They truly didn't know
That's right.
what to do with this heartbreak. And I saw that and thought two things. This is a gap in our churches, I think.
Mhm.
And second, who do I talk to? And there happened to be a worship pastor there that he and his wife just really took me in and said, this must feel like the end, but it's not the end. If the Lord leaves you breathing, then it's not the end. And there's something for you to do, which I had no
Such
idea.
wisdom.
Isn't that wisdom? I mean,
Yes.
I had strong conversations with those two about my spiritual gifts inventory. It showed up a couple of things that I was like, this is not true. And they said, actually, it is true for where you're at right now.
Yes.
It may not be true 5 years from now, but
Yes.
God gives us what we need exactly when we need it. And those
Exactly.
things ebb and flow and move away, and other things rise in a couple of years when you need it. So take that inventory again in a few years. And he was exactly right. The
Oh,
things that showed up when I took it several years later, the the two things that scored the highest for me were worship leading and faith. And I was like, there's no way I would have faith that high if I hadn't been through some things. And there were some verses, at the time, you asked me how I kind of got through some of those times. Well, one of the first verses on this card is from Psalms, and it's Psalm 22. 14 through 15, it says, I am poured out like water, and all of my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax, and it's melted within my breast. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. And I didn't know what David had gone through, but I was shocked that those words were in the Bible
That's
because
right. Sometimes we are, but they are right there for
they're
such a
right
moment
there.
as this.
Everything is there. The Bible defends itself. And I was
Amen.
so stunned in those years to learn that, and I found more. The more I searched the Psalms,
That's
the more
right.
I searched the book of Job or other laments, I just was so surprised to find this heartbreak, this level of heartbreak in the Bible, and thought, okay, this is real gritty life. This
Yes.
is how it goes. I mean, I ended up divorced, and Keith, I was the first one on either side of my family, as far back as we could trace, that had ever been divorced. We come from some gritty people down there in Kentucky, and boy, they're not going to give up those marriages. They'll fight until they don't have any fingernails left to stay married, because probably because that's the right thing to do. But it struck me that I knew of no other person in my family, including the greats and the great greats, that were divorced. And
And that's a hard moment.
ugh,
Stacie, you and I have not talked, but I too have gone through that divorce, and I know that feeling of feeling like I am so alone. And I had two kids at the time and a dog. Okay, and you mentioned running. I went out for long runs, and my poor kids, they rode their bikes with me. They did not know that this was my therapy. Okay. And they were riding their bikes with me. My dog was running with me. And you know what? But it was the only, I had to get some endorphins in my body some way, because I was crashing every day. So man, and you're right, Stacie, the church doesn't know what to do. Didn't they've come a
they're
long
better
way.
now.
Okay, they've come a long way, but at that point the church didn't know what to do. And thank goodness there have been people, like yourselves, even like myself, who have said, hey, we need to address this in an open, candid, completely transparent way. And can I just, I'm going to press the pause button on this story just for a second and thank you for your transparency, because what it's allowing us to do is, I'm hearing your story and it's healing deep spots within me. And the people who are listening, it's healing deep spots within them. So thank you. But God, I pressed the pause button. God did not, because he had more of the story to tell too.
I don't know what to say about that, Keith. I worried that since I was raised such a good person that I didn't have that testimony. I didn't have that one moment where I turned from my life of drugs and alcohol and accepted Jesus and everything changed. I didn't ever have that. And so I just really always feared what will I ever say to people? I I didn't know, but it turns out he gave me a story after all, just a little bit later. I've always been a late bloomer, so I guess that's par for the course. But if anybody can find anything healing in this story, then praise God. All
Yeah,
glory to God, because I am only standing upright because of him. That's the only reason
it's
that,
amazing. It's
yeah.
amazing.
But that verse was a big one for me. And around this, we didn't end up divorcing. And I just remember thinking, and for anyone else who thinks this about being divorced, was I still wanted to be used in ministry, maybe not formally, but I still wanted to be in service to him. I don't even know how that happened. I mean, just the kindness of God somehow kept me from turning my back completely. Uh, but I worried that I did not want to be divorced, but there was no reconciling. He would not hear of. I had no choice. I was abandoned in this situation, and um, God is the ultimate restorer. He is the ultimate. I don't know that I could have ministered to other women or anybody without these things happening to me. So I just see them with different eyes now, that I needed my pain, our pain is necessary for our faith to grow and mature. To be a mature Christian, we have to have these things that we think might almost break us. I didn't think I would live through that divorce. And I asked
Help,
a lot of,
help me understand this a little bit, because rather than cursing the darkness of pain, you're saying that pain was a tool in your life?
yep. I didn't recognize it then until after one thing happened, and I'm glad you asked because it's reminding me to tell you that there was one very pivotal moment when this divorce was happening. I could not accept why the Lord would allow this to happen. I could not accept that he was from a Christian family, a strong Christian family. Someone in his parents' church prophesied over our marriage and all the things, right? I could not understand why. Why I would drive home from work in the evening and not remember driving home because all I could think about was why? I don't. What in the world? Why would you let me meet him in the first place? Why would you let me fall for this? Why didn't I see this coming? How could I have been so blind, too naive, too trusting, uh, too lots of things? Not enough. Uh, mm, a lot of things, too much and too little. But during that time, asking why, I struggled with it so much that it was about to consume me. And one day I was just laying on the floor sobbing, and my dog was laying right next to me. And when I opened my eyes, he's staring at me, these big, beautiful golden brown eyes. But I saw him, but I hurt in my knower. Um, you don't get to know why. And the sooner you can accept that, the sooner we'll move on. And I
Yeah.
almost sat up and went, oh, oh,
Oh,
oh,
yeah,
okay. I don't get to know why on this side of the clouds.
that's right.
That's one of the mysteries of God, the beauty of the mystery of God. It set me free um, to
I've
start a healing process in a different way.
I've always said that if we were capable of understanding all that God was doing, then our God is too small. He's
Oh
so
my
much
gosh.
he's so much bigger than these things. And he's still, it it's an important phrase, not because it's one of those go-to Bible verses, but he did know the plans that he had for you. He did know the things he was going to unfold for you. And if he had given you the why at that point, you could not have comprehended it. You couldn't have
Nor
understood it.
did it matter, Keith, nor did it matter because
Wow, thank you. Thank
to
you.
be honest, and somehow, I mean, I feel like I was fighting for my life during these years, literally fighting for my life, going, I am not going to make it if I don't understand some things. I know you know what I need, and I don't even know what to tell you, Lord. But I, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. And I asked him, I remember hearing a sermon back in Cincinnati that the Lord is a gentleman and he will never force us to anything, but we'll ask him the hard questions. He can shift us and mold us and change us without our even knowing. And sometimes that's the best way. So I started praying that prayer. I don't even want to know what you're doing. I don't even want to know because I won't get it. And I'll probably be mad about it. So I don't want to know how you're going to fix this or you're going to use this or anything. But I don't want to have this heart. I don't want to be bitter.
Yeah.
I don't I don't want this to be the end of me. So I don't know what you have to do and I can't tell you when it happened, but I started to understand the beauty in the mystery of God is that there's freedom in that. It sets me free from having to know and having to understand. I don't have to understand. Matter of fact, thank God, like you said, I don't need to understand it, nor could I ever understand it. And one day when I get to glory, I'll see the B-roll and it'll all come. I'll be like, oh my gosh, no wonder you didn't tell me.
You
I, I,
mentioned you
I
mentioned
don't want
something
to know
powerful.
anymore. I
You
don't want to
mentioned
know
something
anymore.
of your um of your gift of worship leading that was on your heart, and you've also talked about a worship leader. Now, was this the same worship leader that asked you to sing the song
No.
Goodness of God? Okay, a different worship leader. Okay.
It's interesting, Keith. I can kind of chop up my life into decades. It's almost that tidy. There was the decade of my wedding got canceled. There was the decade of the divorce. There was the decade of no one. With all of those years between my divorce. After my divorce, I didn't go on a date for 7 years.
Wow.
And I wasn't mad about it for most of the time. I did some really great things, and the Lord did some really big movements in my life. And I met my hero, Beth Moore, who ended up praying for me in a way. I just kind of lost it at a conference she was at, and she came to pray for me because I was such a mess. I couldn't even tell her why. I was so upset. But she had been talking about what voices we listen to or give volume to in our head. And I wanted what she had, which was authority to speak over the things that were controlling her mind, or I wanted the faith that she had to know, you cannot sway me. You cannot sway me. I wanted the boldness that she spoke with. And so all she said to me was, do you want what you see? And yes, that's it. She
Wow.
prayed for me. That was that. Years went on, nothing big changed. I lost my Bible during that time. It was my Bible that I wrote everything in. And I lost my Bible, and it was a chore to find it. And the Lord woke me up in the middle of the night, which was a chore in itself because I sleep well. But he woke me up and told me to go look in a place that I had looked in a million times. And I went and looked, and when I opened this bag, my Bible fell out. And I was stunned and mad and all the feelings, but it opened up to Isaiah 49:16.
Oh,
And
do
it's
you
just
have
a
that
chore.
Bible here in the room?
It's in my closet if
Okay,
you
no,
want
no,
to.
no. I just think that's so cool that he gave you this Bible back. This is awesome.
And the
Oh.
font is so tiny in it. It's why I don't have it out on my desk. It's because I need a telescope to read it anymore because, age.
Oh, I love it.
Um,
I love it.
but this tiny little verse was Isaiah 49:16, and it says, see, I have engraved you on the palms of my hands. And right, I immediately collapsed in my living room floor going, can you see me? Because I'm really struggling down here. And this was after I had been divorced several years, but it was becoming clear to me that I would not be having children, that would be growing up with my niece and nephews. And I think that pain was even worse than being divorced or, having a wedding canceled. And you asked me about the same worship pastor, and I was saying that there were decades, and every single decade where things happened, there was a church that made a huge mark. There was a worship pastor that made a huge mark and poured into me in each one of these decades. And that second decade was a church here in Anderson, and that worship pastor is no longer there, but I still am in touch with him. Just saw him a couple of months ago, he and his wife, and um, their counsel is, I seek it because it's so wise and so godly, and because they were not afraid of me. They were not afraid of the big mess I was then and didn't know what to do with myself. Um, where the rest of that church, I thought probably could have failed me, they did not. And so I stayed there because of that worship pastor. Fast forward to the next decade, and I'm in another church with another worship pastor who he and his wife saved me in a lot of ways by walking through that next decade of I'm not going to have kids. The Lord still hasn't brought a man. What if he never brings a man? What if I'm never married? What if this never ends? What if the pain just keeps going? I am strong, but I don't want to be.
Yeah.
I want someone to fall apart with. So, Lord, help me be okay no matter what you do. And if that's the case, I still want to be your kid. I still want to do these things, but I don't know how it's going to transpire because I'm just heartbroken. And that was the time at Northview a few years ago when I was assigned to sing the goodness of God. And ooh, what a sacrifice. I believed those words for you. I believed them for everyone I knew. I believed them for people I didn't know. I would say to them, God is so good. Give him a chance. Give him a chance to prove it to you. But I did not believe that he felt that way for me.
Wow.
And I felt like it didn't matter that I was married. I knew that the Bible said it's better for you not to be married. If you can not be married, then don't be married. And I just said, I want to be married. But if you don't have that plan for me, I want to be happy. And I want to be about your business. Um, so when my worship pastor assigned me that song, I tried to get out of it. And he said, I think it's yours to sing.
Yes, I
And
think
I said,
so.
I can't. I've practiced this week. I just cried. And he goes, then that's your offering.
Amen.
And I said, how can I stand up on the stage and cry through a whole song and not even be able to say the words because I'm wrestling it out in my own heart? And he said, well, isn't that an offering of worship?
That is the offering of worship.
That is the offering of worship. And so I cried through it that first time, cried all the way through it, could barely sing it. But I've been asked to sing it so many times since then. That is my anthem.
Yes.
It is my anthem. And I can look back on my life and trace the timeline of the goodness of God. But because that song was such a sacrifice to me, I posted it on Facebook one day and just said, man, sometimes the Lord punches you in the gut. And this one was a gut punch. And it is really challenging to mean what you say. I don't want to be a worship leader that doesn't mean what they say.
That's right.
So I need to believe this. And I do. I just need to believe it for myself. And got lots of great feedback, which was fine. But there was one person that responded that I went to high school with. And we started up a conversation. And 2 weeks later, I went on my first date with what is now my husband, who you just met a little while ago. And he is a man who chases after God and who has taught me that he will stay. And in this process, I've learned about PTSD not being just one particular big bang moment, which it is, of course it is, but it can also be a culmination of abandonments, abuses, heartbreaks. It can be those things too that add up
Yes.
to a trauma that causes us distance from God or causes us distance from other people or causes our heart to be closed off and hard and cold and black. And I didn't want that. And so my counselor explained this to my now husband one time. And he has literally taken me by the shoulders and said, I am not going anywhere.
Anywhere.
And that was like the voice of God to me to say, me and you, we're in this, Stace. We are in this till the very end. And I've got you. And I know you don't get it. But thanks for hanging on. And here's a little There's a little something to keep you going in the next 50 years of your life. And I didn't get married until I was in my 50s, and that's its own challenge in itself. I did not know that I cared deeply how the dishwasher is loaded, but I cared deeply how the dishwasher was loaded. And I felt like such a schmuck for that. But the Lord has taught me so much in being married in my 50s and having been single for so long, that there are things you need to let go of, just like the why. You don't get to know why. And
Oh,
the first time I had my first phone conversation with my now husband, I heard in my knower, heard the word done. And I was stunned, like, this guy that I went to high school with from my hometown, grew up 1 mile down the road from where I did. I mean, I couldn't believe it, but I knew it because now I trust that voice. I don't think twice. If I hear it and it aligns heart, head,
oh,
soul, then I'm all in. God, I heard you say it.
I
And
love that because you began with this, how when we get that alignment out of whack, and now when it gets in whack, John Eldridge talks about a man that pursues his his spouse or the person. I've only talked with Brian online, okay, texted back and forth, but he is a man who pursues your heart, and it's such a beautiful thing. And just so you know, you're not alone. One of the things that Delane had to tell me, my wife had to tell me for so long, is I'm not going anywhere, because that's a real thing. PTSD on that kind of thing is real. Okay. So, and
yes,
I bet she got really tired of saying that. But it became the thing that I needed to hear. Oh,
yes,
Stacie, I want to have you back because there's more to this story, okay? But this is such a powerful place to wrap it, because I not because of just the nice little bow that just got tied on this, but because of the alignment issues that you're
yes,
bringing up, and because of the issues of if you will, the PTSD. That is such an important thing. Is God understands your sorrow, your hurt, your pain. And it's such a powerful moment just to recognize that. And there are people who they may not have had the same experiences that you've had, Stacie, but they've had their story. And in the midst of that story, it has created so much trauma in their life that they
yes,
need this healing. They need to understand that God wants to bring them back into an alignment of their mind, their heart, their spirit, their soul, so that they truly understand his voice has never stopped. It's such a beautiful example. Um, you've been Stacie, I just want to thank you so much because of your candor and your openness and your vulnerability, because you haven't it's just far too easy to gloss over the pain and just camp on the healing, okay? But what you did was you brought us through the whole story, every piece of it, and we're just so indebted to you. um, and you know what,
thank
can
you
I
for asking me to share.
oh
It's been
my
a good exercise in my faith
You know what? I think
to
so,
talk about it.
Stacie. When I heard it, and your husband, and one of our texts back and forth, he said, "This woman has had an incredible impact on women tonight." And today, in the days that follow here, and this goes out to others who are listening to this and watching this, you have had an incredible impact on their life. And I want to invite other people to come and tell their stories. Uh,
Yes,
yeah, please.
it's
I mean,
important.
it's so important.
It's
And
important.
they probably have seen the misty eyes. You used one phrase that just cracked me up. You said, God has to take me on a field trip. I'm a former teacher as well. Okay. God has to take me on a field trip to teach me things. Oh my gosh. I am going to camp on that phrase forever because that was
Really
just
did. Really
incredibly
did.
powerful. So, hey, thanks, Stacie, for joining us.
Thank
And
you,
for
Keith. I
those of
appreciate
you
it.
where you want to get in touch with us, you can email me at story.mosaics1@gmail.com, or you can get on our webpage at storymosaics.com, and you can get in touch with us any way that you need to. Maybe you have a question for Stacie. Maybe you want to follow up on something. I promise to do something. If you have a question, I'm not going to give her email or her phone number out, but if you'll email me at story.mosaics1@gmail.com, it'll give me a chance to pass that along, and then we can find a way for her to use the Mosaics platform to bring healing to your life as well. So thanks again, Stacie, and I'm going to sign us off. Thanks for watching Story Mosaics today.